We're not live. So on Fridays, we were in Russell. Are you starting right now?
We have I see a minute right there, so I'll start at 1 minute.
Yep. Oh yeah, that clock is a few minutes fast. Slow.
It is, because Apple time says it's 5:30.
Exactly.
But we'll wait.
But
we're going to go on Carminati time.
Thank you.
Oh, no problem. All right. Why don't we go ahead and get started? So thank you so much. Good evening for coming out. My name is James Driscoll. I'm the superintendent here for TD3. And the reason why we're here today is to talk about transportation and some possible changes that might be coming. And so at the end of this, I want to get feedback from you. No decision has been made at this point. And so this is us sharing information about transportation and some possible solutions to our transportation problem. But hopefully we can get some solutions that when we make a presentation to our governing board, they can have all the information and have all the input from our community. So if you're here in person, we have comment cards on the table and pins. And so if you want to leave a comment about this process, right up here, we have a blue box that you can drop your comment cards in. We will share all this information with our governing board members at our meeting. If you're online, as you can see, we're live streaming it. You can send your questions to info@tempeschools.org. So why are we here? Last school year, we presented to our governing board some issues that we were having with transportation. And what I mean by issues is we're currently experiencing a bus driver shortage, and it's not just pertinent to our district. It is statewide and actually nationwide. And so one of the things that I tasked our transportation department is, can you find a solution with our current reality, with our current employees to solve us getting our kids safely? And so at the end of the day, all we really want to have happen is that our students get to school, to and from school safely every day. And about 60% of our students utilize transportation as their means to get to our schools. So our current reality is we are short 10 bus drivers every day. So before we even start the day off, we're already short 10 bus drivers that we need in order to do the routes to get our kids to school. Of that, we have on average 8 daily absence. So when you think about that, if you start off the day and you're already 10 bus drivers short, and then on a daily basis, you're having 8 bus drivers that are absent, you're now running behind the 8 ball with that. We have 9 of our 10 office staff. So our director of transportation, our assistant director of transportation, they actually drive buses for us because we're short staffed. And so every day our office staff are driving buses and not in office staff. So if you have a question or say, where's the bus at? There's probably nobody picking up that call because they're all out driving buses as well. One of the things that happens, and I joke, we had a meeting with the staff earlier today, is just today we had one of our buses show up late. And so we had some families, some students that got picked up here late today from school. And that is currently happening pretty much across the board, across most of our schools, especially our late starting schools, because they're the last run in our transportation route system. Lastly, our current system, what we have is, so we have 3 tiers of bus routes. So we have a morning, and then we have a middle, and then we have a late. And so when you think about that, how we get our kids to and from school, we have windows of time. So 30 minutes in between each one of those cells. Well, if you can imagine, if there's an accident, or if a kid, as they're getting on the bus, drops their backpack and their papers fly, and we have to wait for them to pick up there, we have tight timelines to get our kids to and from their homes to our schools. And right now, the 30 minutes is actually a hindrance for us because it's not enough time for us to really get our kids to and from. any hiccup in our route, whether it's we don't catch the stoplights at the right time or there's an accident, that makes our buses be late, and especially for our late start schools like this school. So last year at our governing board meeting, I had our director of transportation propose what it would look like if we used our current resources with all our drivers to provide our kids to be able to come to school safely without any extra additional support. And so her proposal was, if we move all our schools that have buses, our elementary schools, to the same start time. So right now we have elementary schools that start at 7:50. We have elementary schools like this one that start at 9:00, and then we have junior high schools that started, or middle schools that start at 8:20. And so her proposal was, if we move all our elementary schools that have buses to the 7:50, and then we move our middle schools from the 8:20 to the 8:40, that would create a 50-minute buffer. So remember, as I told you before, we have 30 minutes currently. That 50-minute buffer, we could run all our buses with our current staff, not even our employees that are driving in the office, wouldn't have to drive. We can assure that all our kids get to school safely. And so this is what that chart looks like. Now, one of the things you say, well, why now? Why are we having this conversation now? Well, last year at this time, when we did this presentation to our governing board, we said, hey, it's just a presentation of our current reality. We said we're going to spend this whole school year trying to recruit bus drivers, trying to get staffing. And as of last week, we have seen no change in our staffing. We still are short bus drivers. We're still having these issues. And so one of the things we wanted for you guys is to get your input and your thoughts on what we could do differently. This is just one proposal. When we go to the governing board, we want to be able to share with our governing board all our community input and what solutions they might have, so that when the governing board makes a decision, they can have all that input. No decision has been made at this time. And so I know we have people online. If you have comments that you want to say or questions, if you email that info@tempeschools.org, they will bring those questions up to me and I will answer those questions as we go. But no decision, and I just want to make that, has been made at this time. So I don't want you to walk out of here saying, oh, they're changing our bell time. No, this is a proposal for us to be able to get our kids to school safely without using any of different resources, having our own staff doing that, what we currently have. So is there any questions that I can answer right now for people here in the audience?
You say that that this has been a thought for a little over a year now. With this over an hour change for the elementary schools and start times for the students that rely on transportation for school, has there been any thought into the community resources that will be required for that gap in time for those families?
Yes. And so one of the things we looked at is, could we provide Kid Zone? So the city of Tempe works in partnership with us and provides before and after school care. Could that be an option? We've contacted Kid Zone. So in our presentation, we will share what Kid Zone says about, do they have the resources to do that? We also thought about our families. A lot of families choose to come to our schools at these times because it's convenient. It works for their schedules. So that's also a thought process in it as well. It's like, what is the negative consequence for switching it? We might lose families because families chose to come to schools at these times because it works for them. They like that. The biggest thing that we have to do, and I say this in all sincerity, is last year we had a school that I had to send home a letter to their school community saying, hey, you sent your kid to school to go to the bus stop. We were unable to pick up your student. Well, if you're a parent that got that letter and you're at work and you have a kindergarten student who's at the bus stop, who's with that kid? And so at the end of the day, our biggest priority for our district is to make sure we get our kids to and from school safely and that we keep our kids safe. And we're constantly are one accident or two phone calls off from not being able to do that on a daily basis. So our transportation staff, they're wonderful. They do amazing things, but we are taxed to the brim, and we were taxed to the brim last year. And I came back to them this year and said, hey, how are we? And we have no change. And so that's kind of why we got here. any decision that we make, there is a no-win situation. Because for me, as I would tell you as a superintendent, there are 3 things that gets our community upset where they come to the governing board and they voice it. Close schools, you change school boundaries, you change bell times. And so we know that this will have some of our community members upset. And so that's why when we proposed this last year and we presented this to the board, we said, nope, we're going to try to figure this out and work. And if the last resort where we still feel like we cannot, then we would bring it back to the board and say, hey, we're still at this. We need guidance from you. Now, the governing board could easily say, hey, we're going to keep it the same and we're going to let it roll. And a consequence for that could be we might send home more letters to families saying we weren't able to pick up your student. Or they could say, hey, no, we want you to go this route. We think this is in the best interest of our district. For our kids that utilize transportation, we know we can get kids to school safely. And the nice thing about this is, remember I showed you in that slide before that we have 9 of our office staff. With this, if we have people that call out, so we still have that daily average of 8 absences, those 9 people in our transportation department would be picking up those. So that is with our current resources. We wouldn't have to do anything differently, and we can pretty much ensure, unless we have some catastrophe, that our kids can get picked up at the times they're supposed to be picked up at their bus stops and get to school on time, and then picked up on time and get home on time. So any decision we make, there will be consequences, and we know that. And so our job and my job is to provide the board with as much information as possible so they can make the best decision for our district. And so that's why we're here, and that's why we waited, because we thought, like, all right, well, we need to increase our recruitment efforts. We need to market more. We need to sit out there, raise our salaries. We did a compensation study to see, hey, are we paying lower than around surrounding districts? We try to do everything in our power to get more staff, because we get more staff, then we don't have to address this. We could do our routes the way they currently are at. So, very great question. Any other questions? Do we have any questions online? Okay. All right, we have a person writing. This is that awkward silence where we wait.
Well, I can ask the second part to my
Okay.
question is, it's not a secret that Carminati, which is our home school, is a Title I school. And not only will we potentially have a bell schedule change, but we're also having a calendar schedule change, which means that the community and the families that this school serves has the potential to not only have immediate resource issues, but also now potentially unemployment issues, because these families are going to have to say, not only do I have to start my kid's school earlier, but now I also only have 6 weeks to come up with the funds for new school clothes, new school shoes, new backpacks, all of these new resources.
Mm-hmm.
So what kinds of conversations have been had at the district level for these kinds of conversations that families are going to have with their kids, with all of these potential changes? Because the schedule's for sure changing, but now we may also have to have the conversation about the bell schedule.
Okay. So if I heard you correct, I'm gonna paraphrase, and so this, you can nod and say, nope, you totally missed the point. So the first one was, we have a calendar change. So next year, if you haven't heard, we're going to a modified school year, and we start July 19th. And so that's one change. So we're starting earlier than we normally have in the past. So on top of that, you brought up that Carminati itself is a Title I school. And so with that, we have families that have particular needs and resources. And by starting earlier, they might have to have daycare and other options, and that will cost money to provide. So has the district considered that impact that will have on the community as well?
Because now families are having to tell their employers,
Yep.
not only do my kids start school sooner
Yep.
in the year, but now I also have to take them to school earlier, or make sure they get on the bus earlier, or daycare earlier. So it's like a compounding effect. And a lot of employers are laying people off, and a lot of employers are not very understanding of family pressures. So.
Yes. So, yes, we have. And so one of the things that I would tell people is that pretty much all our schools are Title I schools. And so Carminati and all the other, I want to say 18 plus elementary schools we have are Title I schools. And so that was one of the factors we looked at as well. And if we can work with our partners in the city to provide that daycare before or after, we could look at possibly doing that at a reduced rate or supplementing that cost. Those are all things we have looked at and have in the works to try to consider to see if we can financially do that, because we understand that this will have, for a lot of our families, a significant impact. So yes to that question. Yes, we have thought about that and consider. And the big thing I would just come back to for us is there are going to be people, whatever decision we make, that will be positively and negatively impacted. And we know that. And what we have to rest our decision on, and the thing that I would share with the governing board is, can we get our kids to and from school safely? Can I ensure that with our current resources that we can do that for 60% of our students? And as I said to you earlier, it would be, if it was for my best interest, we would do nothing, because no family would be upset with me. But our current reality is, I also have sent home letters to families saying we didn't pick up your kid, and they have called me and emailed me and said, what do we do about that? So I have to ensure that with our current reality, that I can make sure that our kids can get to and from school safely, that are using our transportation. And right now, I really can't. It is a crapshoot every day if we can do that. That was a very good question. I hope they can hear that on the live stream. Okay. Will you grab that for me? I feel like I'm tethered. So I was going to come to you, and I thought that would be bad for YouTube if I came and then I flew back, and then they said, look at the superintendent. All right. So it says, why would you not change start time for junior and middle and high school to earlier start times and keep the younger grades to later start times? Because it is much harder to wake younger kids up that are that early, not to mention much harder to get them ready and out the door earlier. It would only be a 30-minute change for middle school to change, and a 70-minute for elementary. So I said that right. All right. So let me process so I can answer the question. So why would we not change the start time for middle and junior? So our middle schools will change. So they'll change by 20 minutes. And this, yeah. So, yeah. So right now, great question. Right now, you see 3 elementaries up there, but we currently already have 12 elementaries that are already starting at 7:50. And so there are only 3 elementaries that are impacted by this switch of time. Our middle schools, they're currently at the 8:20 start time. And so they would transition 20 minutes later. And that gives you that 50-minute buffer. So remember before I said right now we have about a 30-minute buffer between. That 50-minute buffer is what we would use to maximize the routes in order to get the kids to and from with our current resources. So that is one of the reasons why we already have elementary schools that start at 7:50. So, but yes, yeah, those are the 3 that aren't. Very good question. And I'm sorry, that is bad on your host not to have said that these were the 3 and we had 12. So I apologize to you for that. Any questions online? Okay. You guys are getting me. So I would say it again, because I know I have a board member who mentioned last night at the board meeting that at a meeting I said 1,000,000 times. I did not say it 1,000,000 times. It was the governing board's decision. But no decision has been made. The only decision that has been made is that I need to go and present to the governing board our current reality, and that it hasn't changed since the last time we presented it to them, and that what would they like us to do to give us that direction. And so I value your input and your feedback, because I want to make sure that we give the board all the information possible so that they can make the best decision for our district. And that could be we do nothing. And so I want to harp on you that last year we presented this to the governing board and we didn't do anything. We kept it the same. And there is a consequence for that. We might have to write more letters home to families. And if the board says, hey, let's roll with it, we will do that. And there is a consequence when we move up because we have families that have chosen to come to our schools at these times that are on open enrollment that might make a choice to go elsewhere. And as a superintendent, I want all the kids to come to us. And so we get that difficult decision, but it comes back for us is how can we ensure that we get all our kids to school safely every day with the resources that we currently have. Now, I would tell you before we have this board meeting, if we get an influx of bus drivers that sign up, and if you're looking online and you want to be a bus driver, if you go to tempeschools.org, and it is not a red, it is a go button, top right, and click employment. If we get enough bus drivers to come that we can do, then we won't do anything. We will have enough transportation support that we won't have to change or even propose a change. We will roll with our current schedule the way it is. So that is also an option. So if you're out there and you want to be a bus driver and we got great benefits, we actually pay for your CDL. We would gladly do that and we might not change. So if something changes there, we will gladly update and say, hey, we don't need to. We have the staffing to be able to provide transportation. So, are there any other questions online? No? Are there any other questions here that I can?
It's not a question, but a comment.
Okay.
So I have a high school student too, and she went to Connolly before because of Aspire.
Uh-huh.
So she was supposed to go to one of the other ones, but because of Aspire, she was out of boundaries or whatever. So she had to take the city bus and walk a mile from Southern up to there.
Okay.
And for those students that have to do that are outside of that, the later time I would imagine would be easier. I always worried about her walking by herself, like in the winter time, it's dark and cold.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
not really safe for all those students because they don't have buses.
Yes.
For many of the middle school students, but at least for the elementary school students, they have buses.
That was so if you didn't hear that at home, a parent shared about one of her students that went to Connolly in an Aspire program, and some of our students utilize city buses to get to our schools, and her student would walk a mile. And so she was saying that starting later might actually be beneficial, especially in some parts of our year where it's actually dark in the morning, that having that would be a benefit as well. So I hope I paraphrased. Okay. Yep. Okay. Well, if we have no questions online and we have no further questions here, if you felt like, hey, I didn't want to ask the question in public, we have those comment cards. You can write it down on a comment card, and then we have this blue box here. If you're online and you said, hey, I didn't want to ask this, so he would answer the question publicly on the live stream, you can still go to info@tempeschools.org and put your question there or your comment, and we'll make sure that goes to our governing board as well. I want to thank you for taking the time to come here and just listen to this presentation. And I will say again, no decision has been made. And so one of the things I share with our staff and I will share with our community, anytime a decision is going to be made by us or a recommendation that's going to impact you, I'm going to come to you first before the decision is made and get your feedback and input before we go and make any decision, because I believe we owe it to you to get that feedback. And so that's why we're here. Some people said, hey, why don't you just send out a survey? I felt it would be disingenuous if we send out a survey and everybody says, hey, go a certain way, and then we do the opposite. Because you'll say, well, why did you survey me and you didn't take my input? And so I wanted to come to you, and we're going to all these schools. So it's just not Carminati. We were at Arredondo early this week, but we will hit all of these schools by the end of next week and talk with their staff and also the parents in the community of those schools. So I thank you so much for coming out, and I hope you guys have a good night. Remember that school is, I don't want to say closed, but we're off tomorrow. And so please don't show up to our schools because our campuses are closed due to the spring holiday. So have a great, yes. Oh,
When do you expect to make a decision?
great question. When do we expect? So in terms of we expect to make a presentation to the governing board at our next governing board meeting, which is 2 weeks from yesterday. So I think it's April 19th.
And then it'll be communicated out to the community.
Yes, yes. So if any decision is made, that will be communicated out. We will send it out probably that next day. So Thursday, the 20th, we will blast it via email. We'll send home letters. We will send letters to all the schools that would be impacted if a decision is made differently than what it is. But if no decision is made, you won't hear. It'll be business as usual, and we will go from there. All right. Thank you guys so much. Have a great evening. I'm going to put this in there so we have it.